They had a young son together, and they were kind of looking forward to a night out.
There's surveillance video of her inside the bar as well as outside, and it's at that point where she gets up and exits the patio and is last seen leaving towards the west.
Brown County 911, what is the address for your emergency?
We just found a human body laying in the street.
Okay.
We know where she is or whatever.
We have an explosive new trial for you out of Wisconsin.
This is the most brutal murder that has ever been committed by one person in the history of Brown County.
Doug murdered Nicole in a fit of jealousy and anger, fueled by insecurity, alcohol, and numerous other drugs.
You knew all along what happened to Nikki.
No, I did not.
All Nikki wanted was a ride home. A ride home. That's her baby.
Your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything?
We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
Friday, Saturday nights, a good nighttime party life here in downtown Green Bay.
And on this warm spring night, the action is at a place called the Watering Hole.
It's a friendly atmosphere, but it's really large. A lot of people can fit inside.
Somewhere among the hundreds of people dancing and rocking out with a band from California, the Steel Palace. A young woman who would not live to see the dawn of the next day. Her name was Nicole VanderHeyden, Nikki, at the concert with her live-in boyfriend, Doug.
They had a young son together, and they were kind of looking forward to a night out, and it started off really well from what we know.
But both of them were drinking heavily, police would later say, especially Nikki.
Plus, she was breastfeeding. She had a young son, so her tolerance probably wasn't what it used to be.
When the concert ends, Nikki and friends head to another bar, the Sardine Can, with Doug saying he will catch up shortly.
There's surveillance video of her inside the bar as well as outside. She can be seen on the video dancing, having a good time.
But still, no Doug.
And we know that there were text messages between her and Doug accusing him of staying behind, maybe talking to other women.
Nicole was starting to get irritated and upset with Doug because here she is with all of Doug's friends and she doesn't know them very well. And her boyfriend, who she wanted to spend the night with, is not there. Eventually they move outside to an outside patio area, and it's at that point where she gets up and exits the patio and is last seen leaving towards the west.
A friend tried to stop her and confront her, but just couldn't get her to stop or listen, and she just kind of kept walking down the road by herself.
What happened next would not soon be forgotten in this small city in the American Midwest.
Brown County 911, what is the address for your emergency?
We just found a human body laying in the street.
Okay. Person beyond help, or do I need to give you instructions for CPR?
No, it's beyond help. It's starting to decay.
Is it a male or a female?
It's got long hair, but I didn't go near it.
You couldn't even tell who it was. Her face was completely black and blue. She had more than 240 injuries from what had happened.
The only articles of clothing that were left on her body was a sock on each foot, and then there was like a pinkish colored bracelet that you'd get from like an event on one of her wrists.
Brown County Public Safety, this is Therese.
It was 3 hours later when another call came in to 911.
Yes, how do I go about, missing persons?
It was Nikki's boyfriend, Doug.
Okay, and who's missing?
It's my girlfriend, and she does live with me, and she's never done this before.
What's her name?
Nicole VanderHeyden.
Now, Detective Brian Slinger had a name for the victim and a name for a likely suspect.
And what's your name?
Doug Dietrich.
They had already found the body, and here they have someone calling saying that they can't find their girlfriend.
Obviously, there were some things that were concerning to us. Why did you wait so long to make this phone call, especially when you have a newborn baby at the house that needs mother's attention?
So it kind of painted a picture that maybe Doug had done this.
An officer was dispatched to Doug Dietrich's home.
I'm here for a missing persons report.
We used a audio-video recording device to record it so that we could get a look at him. We focused on his hands, we focused on the general condition of his body, focused on the condition of his house, his behaviors.
Dietrich was not told about the discovery of a body just 3 miles away.
Do you suspect any foul play? If so, why?
I don't know. I don't suspect it, but this is the area she walked in, definitely don't like.
Okay.
His story was he went to bed, woke up once or twice through the night to use the bathroom and to take care of the baby, and woke up the next morning, 10, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there, and she still wasn't home.
Dietrich had not called in the missing person report until 4 in the afternoon.
I'd be lying if I said we weren't alarmed with his level of concern. The level of concern did not seem to match what it should be, I guess.
So that night, detectives got a warrant to search the home Doug and Nikki shared.
It's probably the first person you look to, the boyfriend, the fact that there was a falling out that night. Mr. Dietrich obviously was a person of interest right away.
And Dietrich was brought to the sheriff's office for what would be a grueling 3-hour late-night interrogation.
Stretching? Yeah.
The detectives, Brian Slinger and Lee Kingston, wanted to know why Doug had waited so long to call in the missing persons report.
I wasn't feeling good all day. I was hungover and feeling like shit, and then not wondering. I was thinking she went off with another guy, whatever. All this shit going through my mind.
After about 2 hours, the detectives finally tell Dietrich about the body found in the nearby farm field.
I don't think it's been 100% identified as her, but there's a lot of similarities. What do you mean a lot of similarities? There's a physical description, height, blonde, belly button ring.
They are watching him closely to see his reaction before asking him, essentially, if he killed her.
And you don't know where she is or what happened to her? Not a clue. Did you do anything to cause her to go missing? No, not at all. Besides being an asshole a little bit on the phone,
Now, the detectives raise the stakes, telling Doug Dietrich they want the clothes he was wearing that night when he was out with Nikki, and that they are already searching his house for evidence of a murder.
Is there anything in your, when they go search your house, is they going to find anything in their house they're going to find that's going to say you had anything to do? Absolutely nothing whatsoever. Nothing. I have nothing to do with this. I mean,
For the next half hour, as the detectives watch, Doug Dietrich sobs almost uncontrollably, at one point saying he is scared.
Just try to relax. Take some breaths. You're scared? I want her back. She needs to go back. I hope we can tell her.
Were they the tears of a grieving boyfriend? The tears of someone who was scared he has been caught.
Every last resource. I will find them, Nikki. I will find them. I love you. I love you. I love you. I really do.
Green Bay, Wisconsin is all about its football team, the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you go around here, it's Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, if you don't love the Packers, you might get booted out. It's green and gold here for days and days and days.
But the stadium was empty. The football season had not yet started. On the spring weekend, Nicole VanderHeyden was killed. And so her brutal murder was all anyone talked about.
Many people said, how can such a brutal crime take place in Green Bay, Wisconsin? How can somebody commit such a random act in our community?
Not in my backyard,
It was very scary. I mean, can't think of anything worse. A random attack like that on a young lady at bar close, in a small 100,000 person community. And
the shock of Nicole VanderHeyden's death was felt throughout this family-friendly city.
By all accounts, she was a very good teacher, and she was an excellent mother, a smiler, somebody who they said would light up a room.
Nikki was the mother of 3, 2 from a previous marriage, and the third, 6-month-old Dylan with her live-in boyfriend, Doug Dietrich.
She really cared about her kids and would never have done anything to put them in harm's way or in jeopardy or to leave them alone.
The first big break in the case came with a call from 2 joggers out for a morning run, coincidentally caught on a student driver's dashboard camera.
We were out jogging that morning at about 5:30, and we had to jump over a pool of blood in the road. And if you look close on the right-hand side, you could see where the blood and stuff is.
And then a neighbor found more of the grisly evidence on his lawn, including a wire cord he had run over with his lawnmower.
That's absolutely where the murder took place. The blood that was collected there, the hair samples, and then that cord that was found, which we believe is like a phone charging cord, came back all positive with Nicole VanderHeyden's blood DNA.
And then detectives began to hear from Nikki's friends and relatives that Doug had been abusive to Nikki.
She's been very depressed lately. Why has she been depressed? Doug.
Her sister Heather said Doug drank heavily and used cocaine.
And then my mom said that 2 weeks ago she told her that he has been beating her. She asked, has he ever hit you? She said, yeah. And my mom said, you need to come live with me or go with home. And she didn't.
And one of Doug's former girlfriends, Rebecca Mott, came forward to tell detectives how Doug could be jealous and often violent.
We got in a fight, he tackled me, and I broke my ankle. He would, throw stuff, break stuff, and I would too.
He wasn't the most stand-up citizen or the best boyfriend by any means.
And now the search warrant at Doug's home began to produce results.
Nicole had some significant prints on her back that appeared to be a shoe, which is like a herringbone pattern that's common on the bottom of Air Jordan or Nike Jordan shoes. We located a pair of shoes in Mr. Dietrich's garage that had that similar pattern on them, that also had some red staining, red drops on the bottom of them that we figured was consistent with blood.
And inside of Nikki's car, parked in the garage, was what appeared to be blood splatter, blood drops in the back seat.
We were pretty confident at that time that Doug was responsible. Our theory at the time was that somehow Nicole got home, there was a disturbance or some sort of disagreement out in the street or in the driveway, and then the theory was that Doug used her vehicle, which was in the garage, to transport the body.
At 7:03 p.m., attempting contact with Doug Dietrich. What's the address?
Less than 72 hours after Nikki's body had been discovered, Detective Brian Slinger was on his way to Doug Dietrich's house to arrest him for murder.
We'll talk down there and I'll kind of explain to you what's going on.
He was he was emotional. He had the chance to speak to a family attorney prior to his arrest, so there was no interview after his arrest. He was just transported to the jail.
Doug Dietrich's arrest for the murder of his girlfriend sent another shockwave through Green Bay.
He comes from a pretty well-off family here in the area. He had a pretty good life, and so people just thought he was kind of, a rich kid, kind of getting away with what he wanted.
Dietrich had no alibi for his whereabouts that fateful night when Nikki walked off into the darkness. And the friend who was with him that night, Greg Matthews, appeared to the detectives to be evasive about Doug's movements.
Because I'm going to tell you that there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the evidence shows that your friend, Doug, had involvement in her murder. There's no doubt about it, okay?
And the friend became upset when detectives asked him about Doug's whereabouts in the hour before the babysitter, Dallas, said Doug had returned home.
Who can vouch for you for the 60 minutes before you showed up and made contact with Dallas? Who can vouch you for that? What is this 60 minutes? 1 hour. I'm asking for a 1 hour period of time. Who can vouch for where you were if your phone is dead? So nobody. That's your alibi? Nobody. That's your alibi. Your alibi is the guy that's in custody for murder.
The evidence against Doug Dietrich was building, but the case was about to take another dramatic turn, all because of something the detectives saw on this body cam video of Doug Dietrich when he first reported Nikki missing.
Breaking news on the case of the Brown County woman whose body was found in a farm field.
16 days after he'd been arrested for the murder of his girlfriend Nikki, Doug Dietrich was released from jail.
Doug, how do you feel?
He's not going to have any comment.
People were really shocked and were like, what are police doing? How can they let a murderer go when we know, or we thought we knew, that he was the one that did it?
But behind the scenes, the case against him had completely fallen apart.
A lot of what changed was we were getting evidence back from the crime lab. There's a lack of physical evidence tying Doug to her body, to her clothing.
The blood found on his Air Jordan shoes was not that of Nicole VanderHeyden, but that of a turkey.
Who would have known he would have went turkey hunting a week or two prior and there'd be turkey blood in the garage.
The blood found in Nikki's car wasn't hers, but that of her daughter. And the vehicle couldn't have been used to move the body, as police first theorized.
We're able to find out that that car did not move that entire weekend.
And then the clincher.
We went back and looked at the videos, and we had noticed that Mr. Dietrich was wearing his FitBit the day that we interviewed him at the house when he called in the missing person. We started thinking about, can we get the data off that FitBit to show was he moving around that night?
The device was turned over to crime technician Tyler Bailey.
Fitbit is an activity tracker that you wear on your wrist, similar to a watch or a bracelet. There was a short amount of steps recorded in the middle of the night, consistent with, someone getting up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. And then after that, there was another period where there was no movement recorded from the Fitbit.
Doug Dietrich's Fitbit confirmed his alibi.
And there was no way he would have gotten up in the middle of the night, went out into the front yard, committed a brutal murder, drove a couple miles away, and then came back home.
Detective Brian Slinger had worked hard to destroy his own case and clear Doug Dietrich of the crime, but still felt bad about first arresting an innocent man for murder.
He missed the funeral, he missed certain things, he was painted as this, and I think, anyone would be lying or if they said they didn't feel slightly bad about it.
Okay, well then who do they think did this? Is this person still out there? Are they in the community? I think it was pretty scary for people living in that area too to realize that, okay, if Doug didn't do it, who did and where is this person?
And the key was to find whoever met up with Nicole VanderHeyden sometime after she walked away from this downtown bar and then killed him. Police didn't have a clue.
We reenacted it numerous times, we walked the path, and she kind of walked off into darkness, and that's kind of where we were at.
It would be 2 full months before a breakthrough.
Got a call from the crime lab telling me that they were able to get enough DNA off of one of the socks, of all things, from her body to enter it into the CODIS system.
The CODIS system is a nationwide registry of DNA collected by the FBI. Anyone who has ever been arrested will be in there.
And they got a hit from the state of Virginia for George Stephen Burch.
George Stephen Burch had been arrested in Norfolk, Virginia in 2001 for murder, but was acquitted at trial. He had 5 other criminal convictions and was on probation for one of them, requiring him to stay in Virginia.
I'm thinking, is this a transient? Is this a truck driver that may have been in the area for the weekend? How is someone from Virginia's DNA showing up in Green Bay?
What the investigators did not know was that George Burch had been living in Green Bay for some 3 months, in this house, the home of Linda and Edward Jackson.
I met him a long time ago back in upstate New York. Him and his wife were separating, and he knew I was doing very well out here, so he asked me if he could come out and get a fresh start.
He was extremely polite. He called me Miss Linda, and I kind of liked that. Just very personable, very, very personable.
Burch was a regular at a bar 3 blocks away from the Jackson home, a place called Richard Cranium's.
He was so fun-loving, you know. Everybody at Richard Cranium's called him Big Country, and he was 6'8", tall guy, but very friendly.
He was always, I guess you'd say, very charming towards the girls. He had no problem with walking up to any girl and just talking with them and striking up a conversation.
The Jacksons say they had no idea the man staying in their home was being sought in the Nicole VanderHeyden murder investigation. In fact, Ed Jackson and George Burch had gone fishing the very day her body was discovered.
Oh, he was real happy. He had a big smile on his face and holding it up. And that picture actually played a big part in it also because when you focus in on it and you look at his right hand, you can see the cuts on his knuckles.
But detectives only learned that Burch was in Green Bay after he seemingly outsmarted himself.
We had no contact with him with the sheriff's department. However, Green Bay Police Department did have one contact with him from right around that time frame.
It was from a minor hit-and-run traffic accident involving a Chevy Blazer that belonged to the Jacksons. When the vehicle was found, the front seat had been set on fire. It was the same vehicle Burch drove the night of the murder.
And at that point, the Jacksons called in for a stolen vehicle. And the last person to use that vehicle was George Burch. And he said that, oh, I must have left the keys in the car. Somebody must have stolen it.
But now George Burch's name was in the police department database, along with his address.
So I jumped in my car and ran out to that house, and there he is, standing on the porch smoking a cigarette.
And even better, he had given his cell phone to the police to clear his name in the earlier investigation.
It basically mapped out his night and gave us a lot of the answers that we needed to have.
The GPS app from the phone showed Burch spent most of the night at his favorite haunt, Richard Cranium's, where detectives believe he met Nicole VanderHeyden.
She was just looking for a ride home, and then he ended up bringing her home and sexually assaulting her in front of her residence. She's inside of a vehicle, fell out the passenger side onto the ground, which is where he proceeded to curb stomp her, or stomp her head into the ground, stomp her back into the ground, which is how the footprints would have got, shoe prints would have gotten on her back. And then the phone moved and went directly from Nicole's residence to the scene where the body was located. So his phone showed him at every single crime scene location and basically mapped out that night for us.
Now authorities were sure they finally had the right person who had taken Nicole off the quiet streets of Green Bay and killed her.
Breaking news out of Green Bay today. 38-year-old George Burch was arrested this morning for the murder of Nicole VanderHeyden. Investigators say Burch has been tied to the scene of the crime with forensic evidence.
George, Steve. No, I'm not standing for me. I'm just going to take it back some more time and I'll see if we can handcuffs up.
But George Burch was a cool customer, showing little emotion once he was in custody. At 6'8", 270 pounds, towering over Detective Brian Slinger as his handcuffs were removed.
I told him that he was under the arrest for the murder of Nicole VanderHeyden, and I wanted to speak to him about that. His face didn't change one bit.
Okay, so is this something that you want to talk to me about? Sir? What's that? You don't want to talk to me about that? So if I read you your Miranda rights, you don't want to talk to me? So I would prefer a lawyer. Okay.
But once at trial, George Burch would have plenty to say, offering a version of the night that would turn the trial into a real whodunit.
George, did you murder Nicole VanderHeyden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
You know who did?
Doug Dietrich.
Now both men would be on trial.
We have an explosive new trial for you out of Wisconsin. It's taken the nation and all media outlets by storm.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen.
It was 40-year-old George Burch who was on trial for the murder that had shocked the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That a violent, ruthless killer could do
what we believe the evidence will show Mr. Burch did to Nicole VanderHeyden.
But the lawyers for George Burch sought to turn the tables on the prosecution case.
The defense came out swinging. We're gonna show you how horrible Douglas Dietrich is.
Telling the jury it was Nicky's boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, not George Burch, who had the motive to kill her, just as investigators had first believed.
Doug murdered Nicole in a fit of jealousy and anger, fueled by insecurity, alcohol, and numerous other drugs. The evidence is going to show you Doug did this. At the very least, it's going to give you significant doubt about whether or not George did this.
And so, for 2 full days, Doug Dietrich was on the witness stand, once again having to defend himself.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Prosecutor David Lassay took him through what happened the night of the concert. The couple drinking and dancing and happy, leading up to a dramatic moment.
Doug, when was the last time that you personally saw Nicole alive?
It was going to the bathroom, see you in 10 minutes, whatever, you know? And that's the last time I saw her.
The prosecutor paused to let Doug Dietrich's emotion play out. From the bench, Judge John Sikowski, a former district attorney himself, appreciated what the prosecution was trying to do to overcome a major challenge.
It would be the fact that Dietrich was originally arrested. He would have had more of a motive. He would have been a likely suspect.
Did you have absolutely any involvement in Nicky's disappearance or death?
No, I did not.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
But the cross-examination of Doug Dietrich would be aggressive and brutal, starting with text messages he had sent to his mother just before the night, that he felt trapped by Nicole.
I don't recall that that conversation.
How about when you told her, I'm very seriously thinking about telling Nicole and the kids they have to move. I'm not cut out for this life one bit. Do you remember that?
I remember, I think I sent something on the lines of that, and I was having a little downer day or whatever, and I just said that to my mom with not truly meaning it, I guess.
Did you often say things you didn't mean to your mom?
I mean, yeah, sometimes I would, yeah. I mean, it is my mom. I'm very close to her, and
So since you're close to your mom, that means you lie to your mom?
No, I don't say I would lie. I mean, maybe sometimes, but...
And then to the text messages Nicole sent to him that night when he had not shown up.
Did you hurt Nicole that night?
Do you mean physically or what? No, I mean...
Did you physically beat her in the past?
No, I never physically beat Nicole.
So you just have no idea why she would say these things?
Exactly.
With Doug Dietrich back on the stand for day 3, the cross-examination turned to why he had waited so long to call friends or family or police when he woke up early the next morning and Nicole wasn't there, suggesting he already knew she was dead because he killed her.
Did you search for Nicole on foot or by vehicle?
No, I did not.
Still didn't call the police?
I did not at that time, no.
Because you knew you didn't have to.
And now boring in on his actions when police did arrive.
And then you made sure that before police arrived, you took a shower.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I was feeling grubby and,
You wanted to
needed to wake up and...
You wanted to hide any proof that you were involved in her murder, so you took a shower before the police came.
And then a final stab to make sure the jury knew that police, too, had at first believed Doug Dietrich killed Nicole.
They knew she was murdered 118 feet from your house.
I don't know what they knew at that point.
You knew all along what happened to Nicole.
No, I did not.
That's when the Brown County Sheriff's Office arrested you and told you were under arrest for the murder of Nicole VanderHeyden.
That is correct.
I have no further questions.
The defense had planted its seeds of doubt.
Look, it's a classic jilted lover gets vengeance story. Yeah, it's classic. It's as old as time itself, this story.
But the defense still had to find a way to deal with the overwhelming forensic evidence against George Burch, including his DNA on Nicky's sock and the GPS data pings on his phone showing his travels to and from the crime scene.
The evidence that the state clearly presented was difficult to overcome that.
And so it was no surprise when his lawyers called George Burch to testify.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Given the situation here, especially given the scientific evidence, Burch almost had to testify. And I think what he had to try to do was fashion a story that would somehow explain away the physical and scientific evidence.
He wore a tie and tried to come across as a gentle giant.
George Burch on the stand, sometimes he seemed likable.
But sheriff's deputies were concerned that Burch was no likable, gentle giant.
Burch is wearing a stun belt underneath his clothes so that it's controlled by remote control. They can provide an electric shock to him in case he acts out in the courtroom.
Hey, George.
How you doing?
Good. You've been sitting here for a long time.
Yes, sir.
Probably have a lot you want to explain to the jury.
Yes, sir.
Burch described meeting Nicky at his regular hangout, Richard Cranium's.
I was flirting.
And how was she acting towards you?
Somewhat the same, pretty much. Flirting back and forth with each other.
Burch said they left together and ended up outside her house, where he says they had sex in the back of the Chevy Blazer before someone attacked both him and Nicky.
The next thing I remember was the person behind me had been saying, the first thing I was coherent to me that I could hear them say was, "Look what the you made me do."
Did you know if she was alive or dead at that point?
I didn't know if she was alive. There was a lot of blood on her face, come out of her mouth, on her back.
And again, at that point, did you know who that individual was?
Never seen him before in my life.
Do you know who that individual is now?
Now I do.
Who was it?
It was Doug Dietrich.
And he said Dietrich then ordered him at gunpoint to put Nicky's lifeless body in his Blazer and drop it in a nearby farm field.
What was Dietrich doing at this point?
He was standing behind me with he still had the firearm in his hands, pretty much directing me what to do.
Burch's testimony, if the jury believed it, would explain perfectly why his DNA was on Nicky's sock, why his phone GPS data showed him at the crime scene and at the farm field.
George, did you murder Nicole VanderHeyden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
Do you know who did?
Doug Dietrich.
The final day of the trial was being televised live, locally and nationally.
We're going to be covering the George Burch case today. There's a lot at stake with this story.
So many twists and turns. People were so intrigued by it because they didn't think that this could happen in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And Nicole's family and Doug Dietrich and his family were in the courtroom for what would be the dramatic high point.
Cross-examination.
The cross-examination of George Burch by prosecutor David Lassay.
What really happened was you drove Nicole home 20 miles away from where you lived, fully expecting that you were going to have sex, right? That was your expectation. You were going to have sex. That's why you're driving her home, right?
I was hoping that we would. It was leading from what had happened before and where we had spoken. It seemed like that's what was going to happen.
When you get there, and it becomes clear that Nikki isn't going to have sex with you, when she attempts to go into her house and leave your vehicle, that's when your mood changes, right?
No, sir.
That's when things get aggressive, don't they?
Not at all.
That's when you grab that cord and strangle her, don't you?
No, sir, not at all.
That's when Nikki gets slammed on the ground repeatedly when she's trying to run toward her house, when those bloodstains lead in a direction back to her home.
None of that is true.
Well, how do you know? You were out cold when Nikki was assaulted.
Because you said I did it.
And the next day, you're going fishing with your buddy with a smile on your face and not a care in the world.
It was a pre-planned event, sir, and I wouldn't say not a care in the world. That would not be something I would say.
No further questions.
It had been almost 2 years since that spring night when Nicole VanderHeyden and her boyfriend Doug were at the Steel Panthers concert. Since she sent the angry text to Doug. Since she walked off into the night. Since Doug was arrested for murder, then released when his FitBit gave him an alibi. And since authorities tracked down George Stephen Burch after finding his DNA on Nikki's sock and on a wire cord used to strangle her. The case was about to go to a jury that would have to decide whose story to believe, that of Doug Dietrich.
Did you have absolutely any involvement in Nikki's disappearance or death?
No, I did not.
Or that of George Burch.
George, did you murder Nicole VanderHeyden?
No, sir. Definitely not.
Prosecutor Mary Kerrigan Maris presented the state's closing argument.
This is clearly a whodunit case.
Ridiculing the defense's case.
Their explanation is ridiculous and it's insulting to your intelligence. He tries to make you believe this encounter was consensual as far as sexual activity. Killing her is not enough. He seeks to defame her. Her life's gone, so let's go after her reputation. She's not here to counter these outrageous claims. That's very convenient for him. Nikki did not give up easily. She showed her spirit through the end. Nikki did not go gently into the night. We ask you to return a verdict of guilty for first-degree intentional homicide. Thank you.
In his closing argument, George Burch's lawyer, Lee Chuchart, did not back down from pointing the finger at Doug Dietrich.
Justice for Nicole is not going to be delivered by a wrongful conviction of George Burch. Just because a story sounds ridiculous or sounds unbelievable doesn't mean it is. And I ask that you focus on all the evidence in this case, that you don't continuously ignore that the state arrested Doug Dietrich and there's a full-scale investigation into Doug Dietrich. We've seen the evidence. We've seen him testify. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the connection to this crime. The first piece of evidence I ask that you focus on is when Doug Dietrich actually called the police.
Yes. How do I go about, this missing person?
He didn't call the police until after Nikki's body was found. He knew why. He didn't want the police to come. He was trying to cover up what he did. As we sit here right now, you are literally surrounded by doubt. You are surrounded by reasonable doubt. That's why you must return a verdict of not guilty.
Both sides expected the jury would need several days to review all the evidence and conflicting testimony.
They got the case this afternoon after closing arguments from both sides, and we're waiting to see exactly how long they're going to deliberate today.
Very unusual dynamic in the sense that it's not just did this one do it, it's which of the two did it.
The jury was back after only 3 hours.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've been advised that you've reached a verdict. Is that correct? The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Burch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, is charged in the information.
He just hung his head a little bit, but I don't remember him crying or showing much emotion.
And jurors told reporters it had all come down to exhibit number 23, that piece of wire cord almost thrown away after being run over by a neighbor's lawnmower.
They said, that is what sealed the deal for them, because Doug's DNA was not found on that wire, but Nicole VanderHeyden's was, and so was George Burch's.
For an emotional 2 hours, Judge John Sikowski heard from Nikki's friends and family and from Doug Dietrich's mother, Diane.
I have a hard time driving on Hoffman Road. The site where Burch threw Nikki away like she didn't even matter. She did matter. We loved her and we miss her. All Nikki wanted from him was a ride home. A ride home. Back to Doug, back to her baby. In closing, please go home today. Hug your loved ones. Tell them you love them. Show them you love them.
Nobody came to court to speak for George Burch, and now, wearing his orange prison jumpsuit, he declined to speak for himself.
No, sir, Your Honor.
You know, I just a thought, Mr. Burch. You said yes, sir, and no, sir. The manly thing would have been to say, I did it, I flipped out, I did whatever. Cop a plea, do something. And step up to the plate. You chose not to do that. You still haven't done that.
And then, just before passing sentence, the judge had one final comment about George Burch's behavior.
Drop the body off in a field and then 12 hours later go on a boat and be smiling like nothing happened. Like you didn't have a care in the world. How can we explain that? That isn't human. That is not normal. In Wisconsin, we have life without parole, and that was the maximum sentence that could be imposed, and that's what happened. This is the most brutal murder that has ever been committed by one person in the history of Brown County. That's how severe this case is. This is a crime that would, I believe, merit the death penalty, and for that you have to die in prison.
Ladies and gentlemen, over the course of the next 2 weeks or so, we're going to go on a journey back in time.
The 40-year-old cold case dating back to 1979.
Michelle Martinko.
Michelle Martinko.
Michelle Martinko.
Are you confident that this case will be solved?
No. Why can't they figure this out?
How did he get away with this? Police officers arrived to find that she had been stabbed well over 20 times. It was local lore. We all knew who Michelle Martinko was.
Tonight, stunning news decades after her murder.
New information from DNA evidence. Our jaws were on the floor because that was the first time in 40 years that we had ever received an answer like we'd received.
And they have found the killer's DNA.
Our suspect was likely one of 3 brothers, all living in Iowa.
Which one is it? On December 19th, 1979, the world was Michelle Martinko's for the taking. Instead, she was taken from the world.
Your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you. How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything?
We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
It was 1979, what would be a tumultuous, soul-searching year for America.
All the legislation in the world can't fix what's wrong with America.
Iran, 1979.
The United States suffered its most serious commercial nuclear power plant accident.
The long lines which have made millions of you spend aggravating hours waiting for gasoline. It is a crisis of confidence.
A year that saw the crime rate climbing, especially in the country's smaller cities, including Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Especially around here, folks thought they could just kind of go about their lives
as they always had for decades here, and not have to worry about the violence that happens in those bigger, cities.
All that changed in Cedar Rapids 1 week before Christmas in 1979 at the brand new Westdale Mall. A high school student brutally murdered, her body discovered in her car in the parking lot.
Our uniformed division people went out there to check various places. They checked there and did, in fact, discover the body of one Michelle Martinko.
Any motive at all? Can you think of any reason why anyone would want to kill her?
No, from what our understanding is a very nice young lady. It's a sad situation. We have no idea at this point.
No idea. And it would stay that way for almost 40 years. Until Michelle Martinko's killer was finally tracked down by a detective, Matt Denlinger, who was just a child at the time of the murder.
I was probably at home in bed. In 1979, I would have been 5 years old.
The prosecutor who had handled the case, Nick Baybanks, was even younger, 4 years old.
We were all aware of it growing up in Cedar Rapids. It was local lore. We all knew who Michelle Martinko was.
She had gone to the mall for some Christmas shopping with $180 in her purse.
And this being a brand new mall with 100 plus stores, at the weeks that lead up to Christmas, a lot of people are there for the first time.
Michelle Martinko had come from a school choir holiday banquet and was all dressed up.
She has been described by her friends as being kind of a girly girl, someone who enjoyed wearing evening clothes and things like that. She was bright, she was friendly, she stood out in the crowd. Of course, she was also beautiful.
As a matter of fact, the night that my sister went to the mall, that was the first time she had ever been there, and had the $180 cash on her for that evening, and she still had the money with her after she was killed.
The last person to talk to her that night was Kurt Thomas, who had been in a school play with Michelle and was working at a men's clothing store in the mall.
We were walking and looking at each other and animated and just friendly.
Thomas walked her to the mall exit.
She was saying her goodbyes, she was bundling up, she was calling it a night and going out in that parking lot. She smiled at me. I call it the Michelle smile.
The next time that she was seen was when police officers arrived, of course, on the scene at about 4 a.m. the next morning to find that she had been stabbed well over 20 times throughout her chest, her neck, and her arms, and that she had been brutally murdered. She was in a battle for her life as she was being stabbed to death.
She was a good-looking gal, real good-looking.
I understand, yes, I understand she was.
Any possibility of sexual assault here?
I would at this point, and I certainly can stand to be corrected, I would say possibly not. I don't think robbery is a motive. We don't know at this time.
Michelle's family, including her sister and brother-in-law, were convinced it was an ex-boyfriend, Andy Seidel, who had killed her.
Well, we really didn't have any other suspects.
And they had broken up in a rather unsatisfactory way, and he wouldn't let go, and just seemed like the classic behavioral trait of, if I can't have her, no one can.
But detectives were also suspicious of the friend she had talked to at the mall that night, Kurt Thomas.
It turned into a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
Thomas was taken to the police station even before he knew Michelle had been killed.
The one thing I do remember was the good cop, bad cop. He just flat turned around, leaned over the chair, and asked me why I killed her.
But there were no surveillance cameras in the mall parking lot, no eyewitnesses, and at the time, no DNA testing was available. No way to rule in or rule out Kurt Thomas or any of Michelle's friends. The case went cold.
The theories that were floating around in town, in that small town, those were very hurtful because it was everything from drug rings to prostitution. I mean, you name it.
And for years, her family was in despair, especially her mother, Janet, subjected to ugly crank calls after the murder.
And they'd say what?
Mother. It's Michelle. Do things like that. And some of them would be laughing on the phone.
It was absolutely awful. My sister and my mother were soulmates, and so my mother just lost a part of herself.
Are you confident that this case will be solved?
No. No, I'm not.
The case would remain unsolved for almost 4 decades before a scientific breakthrough.
And they have found the killer's DNA.
Now police would know if the alibis of Michelle's friends would hold up. For decades, it became a sad Christmastime ritual in Cedar Rapids. Friends and teachers gathering at the gravesite of Michelle Martinko.
There's a lot of people in my life, I can't remember their voice, but I can always remember Michelle's laugh.
The community was still struggling to understand her brutal murder just a few days before Christmas in 1979.
We still have a really small town-like atmosphere here, so you know, when something happens to one of our own, we're all impacted by it.
The years went by with no solution. Michelle's mother and father, Albert and Janet Martinko, died not knowing who had killed their daughter.
I would say it destroyed a lot of their lives, certainly their peace and quiet. My little sister was their miracle baby. My mother was 44 when she had my sister.
The mother's diary, discovered later, indicated that she died thinking it was either the ex-boyfriend Andy or Michelle's friend Kurt Thomas who had killed her.
I saw the actual notes that Michelle's mother had made. She thought it was Andy. How did he get away with this, and why can't they prove it? But she was keeping a diary, and it was very troubling to me to see her write my name and then circle it and put question marks.
The millennium came and went. America was attacked by terrorists. The country went to war in Iraq, and the most watched television show, CSI, showed how detectives solved crimes using forensics. But in real life, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the murder of Michelle Martinko remained unsolved.
I would say we were frustrated. I would say we were very anxious. You know, why can't they figure this out?
It turned out the answer had been sitting on a shelf at the Cedar Rapids police station all those years. Evidence from the crime scene that had not yet been tested for DNA until the year 2006, and a CSI-like moment.
Some of the items of evidence that we've kept have been re-examined by lab analysts, and they have found the killer's DNA.
Now anyone who had been suspected or had any contact with Michelle was asked to submit a DNA sample.
Of course, one of the first people that the detectives looked at was the boyfriend, and they took a swab from him, and it was not a match.
But eyebrows were immediately raised at police headquarters when one man refused to give a DNA sample. Kurt Thomas, the last person to talk with Michelle at the mall that night, now married to a judge in Oklahoma.
My wife just was completely silent, and then she was, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts? The police don't call and ask for DNA just willy-nilly out of the blue."
Thomas's lawyer gave him a statement to read to the police detective who had contacted him, turning down the request for DNA.
Read my little statement, and he set the phone down. I could hear the phone going down on the desk, and he just announced it to wherever he was. "We got our effing killer. We're going to get a warrant for your DNA. We're going to get a warrant for your arrest." I've always liked you as Michelle's killer.
But after a prolonged negotiation with the Cedar Rapids police, Thomas's lawyer relented.
And I gave my DNA. And I remember they called and just said, "He's not a match," and they hung up.
And no one else was a match either, of the hundreds of men tested.
They had gone through all of the usual suspect. My husband's DNA was tested. They were even that thorough. So there was just nowhere to turn unless it was a total stranger. And then how do you find that person?
It was in 2015 that Detective Matt Denglinger took on the cold case, determined to find that total stranger. First, sorting through more than 7,000 pages of reports, including some prepared by his father, who was a detective at the time of the murder.
I have to try to find something new to do. I'm really brainstorming. How can we streamline this process?
And it was his wife who gave him the answer, after she had received a Christmas gift of an Ancestry.com research report on her family tree that used DNA.
And at that time, it was kind of a light bulb moment for us. She mentioned, wouldn't that be neat if you could do that with your Martinko case? And I immediately recognized the potential in that. And that's how I eventually got turned on to a company called Parabon Nanolabs out of Virginia. So we actually were able to get an image of our suspect created from that DNA. They're able to create what they anticipate someone would look like from their DNA, including skin color, hair color, eye color, facial structure, things of that nature. It was pretty amazing and is not something that had ever been tried here in Iowa.
So that generated a whole new flurry of activity. They put out the picture, they had a big press release. We went into Cedar Rapids for that, and they aged the person a little bit and did different hairdos.
What I was hoping for is that we'd get 100 people call in and say, hey, it all looks like person A. But the problem we ran into is we got 200 people call in and say it looks like 100 different people.
Another dead end. But Detective Matt Denglinger was far from giving up.
In 2018, the spring of 2018, I saw in the news that they had cracked the Golden State Killer case and arrested Joseph DeAngelo.
Using the most innovative DNA technology available at this time.
Police had matched the DNA found on victims in that case to a relative of DeAngelo, who had submitted her DNA to a genealogy database. It led to his arrest and conviction, and a revolution in solving cold cases, led by pioneers like C.C. Moore.
This technique was really only known to genealogy enthusiasts and people of unknown parentage who used it to find their birth families. We were a relatively small group of citizen scientists that created these techniques and evolved them to the point where they could really be a revolution for crime fighting.
And finally, real hope that this would be the key to solving the murder of Michelle Martinko, using a database of more than 1 million people.
So what we're looking for are people who have significant amounts of shared DNA with that unknown suspect.
And then a hit, a partial match with a woman living in Washington State.
She was kind of our ground zero for building a family tree and working our way back to our suspect. And so we were honing in pretty quick.
The mystery of who killed Michelle Martinko was about to be solved.
Our suspect was likely one of 3 brothers, all living in Iowa.
People in Manchester, Iowa, and the surrounding Delaware County are proud of their small-town values, a family-friendly, safe place in the middle of farm country. And yet, police were now certain that this town of 5,000 people was home for a man with a deep and dark secret. If the DNA test were correct, one of 3 brothers in the Burns family of Manchester had to be the man who had brutally murdered Michelle Martinko.
Jerry Burns, Kenneth Burns, and Donald Burns. And they'd all grown up in the Manchester, Iowa area, which is about 45 minutes from Cedar Rapids. I was convinced the DNA was telling us that it was going to be one of these 3.
After so many dead ends, Detective Matt Denglinger was finally closing in.
Matt Denglinger called me on the phone and said that they had narrowed it down to 3 brothers, and we were just excited beyond belief. We stopped and hugged each other and cried a little bit.
None of them had any connection to Michelle or to Westdale Mall. that we could identify. So it was really tricky to tell which one we thought was most likely our suspect. No criminal records. They were all entrepreneurs. Ken and Jerry still live in Manchester, and they both run different businesses. And then Donald was an entrepreneur also, and he lived down in Davenport.
Well, it was hard to sleep at night. Which one is it?
In great secrecy, Cedar Rapids police detectives descended on Manchester.
We were on a lockdown. No one knew what we were doing or what we were trying to accomplish. We wanted as little information getting out as possible. We needed to collect DNA to confirm which one it was. So we had to do that covertly.
They began with the brother detectives thought was the most likely suspect, Kenneth Burns in Manchester.
We followed him around for the better part of a day until he went and had lunch at a golf course clubhouse. And then we were able to collect a drinking straw out of his glass and send that back to the state.
The Iowa State Crime Lab in Ankeny made the case a priority and had results within days, comparing the new sample with the DNA collected off Michelle's dress 4 decades earlier.
They told us after comparison that Kenneth was not a match for our suspect.
Now to Davenport, along the Mississippi River, where Donald Burns lived.
He moved to Davenport with the bright lights in big city, and he seemed to me like he was the most logical of the three to have done it.
The detectives waited outside his home for Donald Burns' garbage to accumulate.
And we were able to covertly collect a glass and a toothbrush out of his garbage, and we found out that that's not a match either.
Finally, back to Manchester, and the brother detectives had thought was the least likely of the three to be the killer, one DNA sample away from being arrested.
And we observed Jerry leave his business around lunchtime one day, went to the Pizza Ranch buffet restaurant there in Manchester, Iowa. We decided that the straw that he was drinking out of was going to be the best item to take. And after his lunch was over, they got up and left, and we walked over and took the straw out of the glass after it was left there for trash.
Once again, a rush order for the technicians at the Iowa State Crime Lab in Ankeny.
And when we got that phone call, our jaws were on the floor.
It was a match.
That was big. I wanted to leave the second I got that phone call and go arrest him, but, cooler heads prevailed.
The plan instead was for Detective Denglinger and a retired detective who had worked on the case, J.D. Smith, to go back to Manchester
and see what he had to say for himself. So we walked right into the business and knocked on the door to his office.
Hey, how are you today? Jerry, my name's Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm with the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
No smoke and mirrors, no tricks up our sleeve. We're going to just be honest with you and see what you're willing to tell us.
Now at age 64, with a full face and a friendly pet cat, Jerry Burns listened as Denglinger laid out the purpose of the visit, all recorded on an undercover camera.
We work in the cold case unit down at the Cedar Rapids Police Department, and we're following up on an old case. I don't know if you've heard it in the news at all. It's a homicide that happened at Westdale Mall. Michelle Martinko, is that something you've ever heard of?
Yeah.
First, Denglinger showed Burns a picture of Michelle.
This is a picture of Michelle. Is that anyone you ever remember seeing or anything like that?
No.
That's not a name you knew or anything like that. Okay.
He actually agreed to be interviewed for quite some time.
Now Detective Denglinger began to close in, telling Burns he had a warrant to collect a DNA sample from him to make sure there was no doubt.
I already knew in the back of my head that Jerry was responsible for killing Michelle. His DNA was on the dress.
And then all the cards on the table.
Just spitballing here. But I'm just thinking, we kind of know going in that this is probably going to be a match.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why would that be?
Well, we were kind of hoping you'd tell us. The reality is we're not here on a whim. We're here to confirm what we already know. I already collected some DNA from you that you got rid of before. And so I'm telling you, Jerry, I already know that your DNA is going to match the DNA that we have on file.
Outside, prosecutor Nick Maybanks was in a surveillance van, listening to a live audio feed of the interview.
The reality is we're not here on a whim.
I was on pins and needles as I was listening to the interview take place.
The date chosen for the confrontation was December 19th, the anniversary of Michelle's murder. It was no coincidence.
I mean, I think in any investigation, you hope that the suspect confesses. We thought that, there could be a possibility that that date would have meaning to Mr. Burns.
Do you know what today is?
19th of December.
Did you murder someone that night, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
Jerry.
Test the DNA.
Why did this happen, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
What happened?
I don't know. I was not there that night.
You don't know why this happened?
I was not there that night.
Well, we know better than that, Jerry. You know better than that. You know I'm not lying.
He was in full denial mode about having any involvement. I didn't get quite what I wanted, which was just a full confession explanation. Maybe I was overly optimistic I could get that from him, but...
One last try.
Take a good look at her picture for me, please. And just really make sure in your mind that this is not someone you know.
I don't believe
or that
so.
you met.
So eventually we came to the conclusion that he's not going to provide us any more information, and we're not going to get any more evidence to connect him to Michelle. So at that time it was decided that we were going to arrest him for the murder of Michelle Martinko.
Tonight's stunning news of the arrest decades after her murder. Authorities arrested 64-year-old Jerry Lynn Burns of Manchester this morning. He's been arrested for first-degree murder in the stabbing death of Michelle Martinko.
But once the case got to the courtroom, it was not so cut and dried. Burns' family was able to hire one of Iowa's top defense lawyers, and the reliability and the constitutionality of the DNA evidence would be put on trial. Without it, a conviction would be impossible.
This could not have been Jerry Burns. It just didn't make sense.
State of Iowa versus Jerry Lynn Burns. The state of Iowa accuses Jerry Lynn Burns of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Michelle Martinko's friends and family packed the courtroom to get their first in-person look at the man accused of the brutal murder.
Jerry Burns looked like the most ordinary man you've ever met. He looked like he couldn't possibly be a killer.
I thought he would be just a monster to look at, but he was just a very low-key, average-looking kind of guy. You would have thought maybe he was in there for a parking ticket.
But if convicted, Burns faced life in prison without parole for a crime committed 40 years earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, over the course of the next 2 weeks or so, you're going to go on a journey back in time. Michelle Martinko was a girl out on the town. She would talk to anyone she considered to be a friendly face. Those in her class, those in the concert choir with her, and those that were in music or on the twirling squad with her. Michelle Martinko, forever 18.
And as the lawyer for Jerry Burns, Leon Spees, prepared for his opening statement, he understood the emotional power surrounding the memory of a beautiful teenager whose life was cut short.
And no one in this courtroom at any point is going to be critical of Michelle Martinko. There was no reason for her to die, and there was no reason for any violence to be inflicted upon her.
To take the jury back in time to 1979, the prosecution began with classmates of Michelle Martinko.
She was a real sweet girl.
Always upbeat, always dressed impeccably.
Including her one-time boyfriend, Andy Seidel.
It's hard to characterize someone as good and as pure as she was in terms of how she would treat others.
You know, Andy was a nervous wreck, understandably. Not only did he love Michelle back then, but he had went through a lot being, you know, the target of the investigations.
And of course, for years, Michelle's family was certain Andy was the killer. After testifying, he left town before Michelle's sister could talk to him.
I would have liked to have personally apologized to him for falsely accusing him for all those years and for thinking that he was capable of doing something like that to Michelle.
Next to testify was Kurt Thomas, who also had been considered a suspect and was the last person known to have talked to Michelle at the Westdale Mall.
I remember that night. I remember Michelle, her smile. The goodbye smile. I mean, it's affected my entire life.
Including, he says, a sense of guilt that has weighed on him ever since that night.
We lived in an age of innocence, and we didn't think about monsters in the parking lot. And but it has absolutely consumed me that I didn't walk her to the car. If you'd have walked her to the car, it could have all been different.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Now it was time for the jury to hear the 4-decade-long detective story as lead detective Matt Denlinger took the stand.
Nobody to this day, I think, knows more about this case, including me, than Matt Denlinger.
Denlinger described the quest by the Cedar Rapids Police Department over the years to find the killer.
This is a picture of Michelle.
Leading to Denlinger's secretly recorded confrontation of Burns. The video played almost in full for the jury.
And Your Honor, permission to publish and play State's Exhibit 14A, the interview.
You may.
Hey, how are you today?
Burns' lawyer called the video evidence the low point of the trial for their side.
Yeah, it was difficult to try to predict how the jury was reacting to Mr. Burns' questioning there at his office. The natural reaction, I think, would be to protest loudly, no, I had nothing to do with it.
And then the video in the back seat of the police car with Burns under arrest, a barely audible passage when Detective Denlinger asked if he had forgotten what happened.
It's possible this happened and you're not remembering it.
Burns suggested memories can be blocked out.
You block things out of your memories. Oh, you block things out. I got you.
Now that we've watched all 56 minutes of this video, Matt, where in the interaction between you and Mr. Burns in the squad car does he deny killing Michelle Martinko?
He never denied it.
In this video, does Mr. Burns tell you emphatically that you have the wrong guy?
Never.
Did he ever say to you, this must be some kind of mistake?
No.
The prosecution played its final card with a surprise witness from inside the county jail, where Burns, in the dark shirt on the left, had been held since his arrest. His cellmate, in the white shirt, turned informant, Michael Allison. He said Burns called him son, and as seen in this surveillance video, even signed a copy of the Cedar Rapids newspaper with a front-page story about the Martinko murder case.
It says, to my favorite son, Michael, Jerry Burns.
But the informant's most damning testimony suggested Burns felt he got away with it.
Has Mr. Burns discussed with you his feelings regarding the potential outcome of his trial?
Yeah, he feels like no matter what happens in this case, that he wins because he had the opportunity to be out there with his family all these years.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
For all the talk about 40 years earlier, it was the modern world's advances in DNA that were at the heart of this trial. And nothing would be more important than Michelle's dress, brought into the courtroom on a mannequin by Detective Denlinger, to show the jury where the DNA that matched Jerry Burns' sample had been located.
There's a 1 in 100 billion chance that it would be somebody else.
The lawyer for Jerry Burns knew what he was up against.
There was no disputing that there was evidence of Jerry Burns' DNA at the crime scene, but the question was, how did it get there? When did it get there?
So it was the job of the defense's only witness,
The defense called Dr. Michael Spence.
forensic consultant Dr. Michael Spence, to make sure the jury understood what's known as the DNA transfer theory.
It can be from coughs, sneezes, speaking as I'm doing right now. I'm sure my DNA is right here on this microphone.
And then 2 hours into his testimony, Dr. Spence was asked the pivotal question.
Is it, Dr. Spence, a plausible explanation that the DNA of Jerry Burns found on the dress or on the gear shift could have come about by a transfer?
Objection. That is speculation. There's no evidence in the record to suggest that, and no foundation to make that opinion, expert or otherwise.
Now the defense's entire case strategy depended on the judge's ruling.
The witness will be permitted to respond, answer the question, the hypothetical question.
Was it plausible that Jerry Burns' DNA ended up on Michelle Martinko's dress by some sort of innocent transfer?
Yes, that's a distinct possibility.
Both sides felt they had done enough to win.
At this time, ladies and gentlemen, it is the time in the trial for each of the parties to present what's called a closing argument.
I was looking over to watch Jerry Burns to see what reaction he had with the presentation of the final argument. He had no reaction at all.
On December 19th, 1979, the world was Michelle Martinko's for the taking. Instead, she was taken from the world. I wanted to bring the jury into the story of where these two lives, these two people, intersected that night. He saw her leaving and he followed her. She's taken by surprise, but she knows that she has to fight. He knows he now must eliminate her because she can identify him. Meanwhile, the killer would be able to go on with his life. Raise his family, run a business, enjoy those years. No doubt haunted by the prospect of one day receiving a knock on the door that would eventually come.
And prosecutor Nick Baybanks replayed for the jury the video of that day he said the knock did come on the door.
Hey, how are you today? Jerry, my name's Matt. Nice to meet you.
How would you act if somebody came and said your DNA was on the crime scene, started implying you in a murder? Well, you know what I'd do? I'd say I didn't do it. You got the wrong guy. Not, I don't know. I don't think anything happened. I don't think so.
And the prosecutor knew he had the DNA evidence on his side, scoffing at the theory that Burns' DNA was somehow transferred onto Michelle's dress by accident.
It's not reasonable. It's not founded in the evidence, and quite frankly, it's not even within the realm of possibilities. The evidence shows, beyond any reasonable doubt, the defendant killed Michelle Martinko. The state of Iowa is asking you to enter a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree.
Thank you, Mr. Maybanks.
But the prosecution case had a glaring hole. Where was the motive? Why did Jerry Burns kill Michelle Martinko?
Mike Korobanix, you're a former prosecutor. It's tough to prosecute a case against a defendant with only DNA and no really clear motive for this defendant to have killed this victim.
I couldn't agree with you more.
The jury was not shown what prosecutors wanted to present as, in fact, a really clear motive. The disturbing internet searches discovered on Jerry Burns' computer about assault, rape, and murder, such as blonde molested after getting strangled, and sex with freshly dead person.
There was indeed a motive, a pathological need to kill and to gain personal pleasure from the act of killing.
But Burns' lawyer, Leon Spees, fought successfully to keep the graphic computer searches from being used as evidence in the trial.
We didn't think it was strong evidence of a motive.
And with the computer searches kept out of the case, Spees was able to argue there was no evidence of a motive for this family man to target Michelle Martinko.
He is a characteristic small-town Iowa businessman with a great group of children in his family. He's kind of the spitting image of a true Hawkeye.
The biggest hurdle for the defense was the DNA evidence linking Burns to Michelle's dress. And Spees reminded the jury of his expert witness's testimony about how DNA can be transferred and is not infallible.
This is not just phony stuff or something that was made up. This is important scientific information that's invaluable and necessary for your critical appraisal of all of the evidence in this case.
And then finally to those damning police interrogation tapes of Jerry Burns.
Much has been made about whether or not Jerry, in being questioned by investigator Denlinger, denied that he had killed Michelle Martinko.
Test the DNA.
Why did this happen, Jerry?
Test the DNA.
What happened?
I don't know. I was not there that night.
You don't know why this happened?
I was not there that night.
I was not there that night. It cannot be said, with your allegiance to the law and the facts, that Jerry Burns is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Your verdict must be not guilty.
The jury went out late in the day. Even the lead detective, Matt Denlinger, worried the prosecution case had issues.
Lack of witnesses, lack of a confession, lack of other things that connected Jerry to the crime scene or to Michelle.
It was a long trial with lots of evidence, lots of exhibits.
I've seen quick juries, I've seen juries that take longer, and I've seen hung juries.
This was a quick jury.
After about 3 hours of deliberations, the jury reached this verdict.
The members of the jury, through the foreman, have signed verdict form number 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jerry Lynn Burns, guilty of the charge of murder in the first degree.
We were hugging each other, just joy, excitement, relief. Oh my goodness, relief.
And in the wake of Burns' conviction, questions were now raised in Iowa about whether he could be linked to other unsolved murders and disappearances in the state.
I field calls about that to this day. People calling in suspecting Jerry's somehow responsible for other crimes. And I'm open to that idea.
Including the unsolved disappearance of an Iowa TV news anchorwoman in 1995, Jody Huisentruit.
And if you take a picture of Michelle and of Jody Huisentruit and you put them side by side, they're twins.
Burns' lawyer says there is no evidence of any connection to any other crimes committed by his client whatsoever.
Well, I think it's bizarre how a person could do something so brutal and not have other instances of doing something.
And what about the still unsolved disappearance of Burns' cousin, Brian Burns?
Brian, his own cousin, he disappeared off the face of the earth on December 19th on the anniversary of Michelle's murder. Pretty dadgum sure they got the right person for more than one reason.
After a delay because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Jerry Burns, in his orange prison jumpsuit and wearing a mask, was back in court to hear his sentence. There is no death penalty in Iowa, and he got the maximum possible, life without parole.
Jerry Lynn Burns, you are now remanded to the director of the Iowa Department of Corrections for the rest of your life.
Even so, Michelle's family was not fully satisfied with the outcome.
I think he did get away with it. I would have liked to have seen him spend the rest of his life in prison starting with age 26. But it didn't happen, and I'm at peace with that because we're just glad they caught him. We thought we'd die not knowing who did it.
Now they do.
She's forever 18. You know, she's forever just that beautiful person.
Where is your emergency?
My mom was laying here on the floor.
I said it had to be somebody that loved her.
Is an Iowa son a seed of evil? It's a case of murder on the farm.
She is gone because someone shot her.
Yes, you did, Jason.
He told me that if I didn't get on the bus, that he was going to make sure I was under the bus.
I asked why he didn't farm together with his dad. And his response was, I can't because my mom is a bitch.
There's only two people in this world who know what happened on June 19, 2015. And one of them is dead, and the other one's sitting behind me.
The killer is still out there that shot her!
Okay, your wife is in a bar, you said she's unresponsive?
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything?
We, the jury, and to find the defendant. Where is your emergency?
Yeah, I need an ambulance, man.
Okay, to what address?
132 Perry Street.
It was the Iowa farm home of Shirley and Bill Carter, their son Jason describing a horrible scene.
My mom was laying here on the floor, where she's dead, and I don't know what happened.
Jason's father, Bill Carter, was next to arrive.
And I went right in the kitchen, and there she lay. And I said, I'm so sorry, Mama.
Shirley Carter's murder in her remote western Iowa farmhouse devastated and ultimately would destroy her family.
It's really like the most horrific nightmare you could ever imagine, to lose someone that you love so dearly, and then your family to be just shredded, ripped apart.
She would be ashamed of how her family has fallen apart.
At the age of 67, Shirley Carter had raised 3 children, always busy with her grandchildren, and still active on the farm, with her own John Deere tractor to help in the family's 900 acres of soybean and corn.
She was a hard worker, that's for sure, and she loved her grandkids, and, I miss her.
Her husband of 52 years, Bill, actually talked of suicide.
Well, I thought I'd lost everything. Everything. I never had any trouble in my life. Even when we had to get married young, we never had trouble. And then for something like this to happen in our old age, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
And as Bill Carter replayed in his mind the image of his wife's body that terrible morning in the kitchen, he began to wonder.
Because she was laying face up, and her hands were like this across her chest, and her eyes were open. And I thought, you don't die that way. And I said to Jason, I said it had to be somebody that loved her.
And it was his youngest son, Jason, who found the body and came under suspicion almost immediately, as the lead detective, Mark Ludwig, would later testify.
He was immediately on my radar even before I arrived on the scene.
Ludwig had listened to Jason's 911 call as he drove to the scene, and something did not sound right to him.
I don't know what happened.
And right away that set bells off to me, in my mind, of his words that he used, how he described the scene. and his emotions.
What do you like? You've been waiting here for 2 hours.
How would Jason know she had been there for 2 hours?
He's attempting to introduce that she has been dead for 2 hours when he has a solid alibi.
2 hours earlier, Jason Carter was seen on video at a grain elevator, but Agent Ludwig remained suspicious.
My experience tells me that if a person goes into great detail of the crime scene, that is abnormal. You don't do that when you just find your mother dead on the floor, unless they're trying to be deceitful.
Adding to the questions about Jason was a secret he had kept from police and his wife, a torrid extramarital affair. A secret revealed when police discovered a phone he had hidden under the hood of his truck in the fuse box. It was a phone he had been using to send texts to the local woman with whom he was having the affair.
Since I didn't bring that to their attention right out of the gate, I guess they just assumed that I was nothing but a liar. And a liar and a cheat. And for that reason, the lead investigator just zeroed in right on me and never lost focus.
Within 3 days of the murder, both Jason Carter and his wife Shirley were in the back of a patrol car, being brought into the local sheriff's office for questioning.
They took me into a small courtroom there at the sheriff's office. And, you know, I will never forget that. You know, and they told me about Jason having an affair. And of course it was, you know, just like, to be honest, you know, just so disappointing. And more than anything, just heartbreaking.
Down the hall in the sheriff's office, Jason Carter was in the middle of what would be an almost 11-hour interrogation.
So you'd have my deepest sympathy, you really do. Thanks. Okay.
He was asked and agreed to take a lie detector test.
Okay, lean back, try and relax. So, we'll begin the test. I'll have your feet flat on the floor. I'll look straight ahead and answer no to each question. Okay?
Had me sit there, put the gizmo, put everything on me, and basically started to ask me questions.
While the test was underway, elsewhere in the sheriff's office, lead investigator Mark Ludwig was trying to get Shirley Carter to turn on her husband.
Mark Ludwig threatened me. He told me that if I didn't get on the bus, that he was going to make sure I was under the bus. And I started to say to myself, something's terribly wrong here.
Shirley was confident her husband would pass the lie detector test and everyone could go home.
Okay. Regarding the death of your mom, do you intend to answer each question truthfully?
Yes.
Okay. Did you physically hurt your mom?
No.
Okay. Now this is important. When I say physically hurt your mom, okay, I want you to know exactly what I mean. What I mean is, did you cause her death?
No.
Okay. Do you know for a fact who hurt your mom?
No.
Okay. Once again, I don't want to know if you have an opinion or I think this guy. Take the question at what it means. Do you know for a fact who hurt your mom? No. Okay. Is that test, please? Still.
Right after the test was over, he left the room for maybe less than 5 minutes. He came back in and he said,
The month of July is a pivotal one for Iowa farmers. All eyes on the weather.
Producers obviously watching the weather
and on corn and soybean prices.
So USDA upping its corn price forecast by a dime to an average $3.60, which would be 4 cents higher.
But at the Carter farm in Lacona, Iowa, as they mourned the death of Shirley Carter, the anxiety was over the growing suspicion by the family about Jason Carter's role in her murder.
You gotta remember, he's still my son, and he was my favorite son. I always thought he'd farm with me someday.
Jason Carter was at the sheriff's office, about to learn how he did on the lie detector test.
We score them in 3 different ways. Okay, you can show non-deception, which means that we don't see any variation, inconclusive, which means we're not sure, or deception, which means we haven't heard the whole story yet, and you were deceptive.
The lie detector test was a crock of shit. That lie detector test was 110% wrong. So, I don't know. They sure tried their damnedest to get me to fess up to something I didn't do.
And State Police Agent Mark Ludwig used the results to bear down on Jason Carter.
Jason, what are the 2 things that you were deceptive on? Do you positively know who did this?
No!
Well, according to the test, you do.
Well, that damn thing is wrong.
It's not wrong.
It is too.
It's not wrong.
I never touched my mom. I never hurt her. The killer is still out there that shot her.
So back to the beginning.
What happened at your mom's house?
She was shot dead.
I understand that, Jason. We need to get to the truth here.
That is the truth.
No, I think
I walked in the door and my mom was laying in a pool of blood.
But Agent Ludwig says he knew that was not true.
The way he describes the body on the floor and still bleeding gave me great concern when I arrived on scene and looked in the window, as there's not blood everywhere. There's very minimal blood on the crime scene.
Okay,
I walked in and found my mom dead, and that's it,
Jason,
period.
That's not true.
That is the truth.
It's not true, Jason.
That is too the truth.
It's not true, Jason. We need to get past that, and we need to get to what the truth is.
I'm telling you the truth, the god-awful truth.
Jason.
I'm telling you the truth.
You're not telling me the truth, Jason.
Yes, I am.
Jason Carter was getting increasingly frustrated and angry with Mark Ludwig.
That guy is, in my opinion, pretty much the devil. I don't know how else to say it.
You're the one failing the
things,
polygraph examination.
and you haven't done
Nobody else fits those things. Jason, I'm confident. I agree, poor mom. She doesn't deserve this.
Exactly.
She doesn't deserve
She
what
doesn't
happened
deserve.
to her.
If
and
she
doesn't
could talk
deserve
right
you
now,
sitting here.
she'd strike both your asses dead because she knows I didn't do that. Okay?
She does know.
She would strike both your asses dead because I didn't do this. And if you keep blaming me, I guarantee both of you will go to hell because I didn't do a damn thing to my mom.
No, Jason, I'm gonna keep telling you did it because you did.
No, I didn't.
And together we can get past this. But you condemning me to hell isn't gonna change the facts of what occurred.
One of the facts was how the Carter house appeared to have been ransacked, something Jason Carter pointed out to his father right away that morning.
Then he said, "Dad, look, somebody's robbed you." And when I went into my office, all my drawers had been pulled out and dumped, just dumped. They hadn't went through anything. They were just dumped. And then he said, "Let's go in the bedroom." In her drawer where she keeps her bras and her panties was open and nothing was taken. Her purse was hanging on our granddaughter's high chair. And she had $140 cash in it, and she had credit cards in there. And none of it had been touched. So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense.
It made sense to Agent Ludwig.
The crime scene is that of a adolescent mindset. I need to stage this robbery. I need to make this look like a robbery. And
at that point, no one knew the bedroom was ransacked other than Jason Carter. So how was he known privy to that information when nobody else was?
Another question: how was Jason Carter able so quickly to discover a bullet hole in the floor and another one in the refrigerator?
You know what? I've done this a very long time, and you're right. People do react with disbelief and stuff when they find a body like that. You know what they don't do? They don't survey a crime scene and start telling me where bullet holes are at, Jason. That's what they don't do.
The gun used to kill Shirley Carter was never found, but Jason early on suggested it was a hunting rifle found missing from his father's gun safe in the basement.
What do you think was used to shoot your mom?
I think that .270 rifle was used to shoot my mom.
It was a Remington bolt-action .270 like this one.
Where'd it go?
You tell me.
I don't know.
I think you know that's the murder weapon because you know what happened.
No, I don't.
Clearly, I believe Jason Carter knows exactly where that gun was on that crime scene. He placed that gun somewhere. I don't know where he put it.
Agent Ludwig and a second agent went around and around with Jason Carter into the evening.
These two guys were in my face a foot away, just ripping into me, saying, you know, you did this, you know you did this.
This doesn't matter.
We're not talking
my
about
mom is gone, and you haven't.
You can't tell the truth. You're
Bullshit.
Right.
Bullshit.
You're right. Your
Bullshit.
mom is gone.
She is gone because someone shot her.
Yes, you did, Jason. And
no,
you
I
step
didn't.
up and take responsibility for your actions.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you people? I would never harm a hair on my mom's head.
It was only after Jason's wife Shelley demanded to talk to him on the phone that the agents gave up on their efforts to break him, to get a confession.
She demanded that she was either coming in or I was coming out.
She said she wants me to quit talking to you and we get out now.
That's fine. Like I told you from the very beginning or whatever, you're more than welcome at any time.
Okay,
I mean,
I'll go. But I don't have anything to hide, Mama. I told them there's no way I'd hurt my mom.
So that's when I got up and I walked out.
I never had my doubts about Jason's involvement with his mom. Now, did I have doubts about our marriage? Huh, you're not kidding. I mean, you know, just what a disappointment. But I could have been a scorned wife because that's what Mark Ludwig wanted me to be. But I was raised that you do things because you know they're right. And I knew that he didn't have anything to do with his mom's death. So it wouldn't be right for me to be a scorned wife and say, you cheated on me. Now you can pay for your mom's death. That wouldn't be right. It didn't have anything to do with it.
She was ready to go to war for the man who had cheated on her, and she would have to.
The first thing that just stood out about this case was the unimaginable tragedy of a man losing his wife of 52 years and coming slowly to the conclusion in the days after the homicide that his son was the killer.
Well, I wanted some kind of justice for my wife, some kind of justice. I didn't want her dying and no justice whatsoever.
go out there with your family and we'll chat.
But his son Jason Carter had walked out of the sheriff's office with no criminal charges filed, even after he failed the lie detector test.
The police didn't do a good job.
So Bill Carter hired his own private detective to investigate and re-examine the evidence in the case.
The thing that took Bill down the path of believing that Jason was the killer was the evidence.
Starting with what Jason had said about the gun safe in the basement, where one rifle, the likely murder weapon, had gone missing.
And they said, we don't know anything about a gun safe. We don't know anything at all about a gun safe.
I didn't even know he had a damn gun safe till just recently.
Well, I knew that was a lie because I knew they had gotten it for me for Christmas.
A photograph would later be found of Jason and his then toddler son assembling the gun safe for him on Christmas morning.
He and his wife both lied constantly, and that made it easier for me to tell the truth about what happened.
And more troubling to him, Bill Carter wondered how his son seemed to know right away that morning that Shirley Carter had been shot twice.
There was no way you would know that unless you did it. And then I knew that he did it. I knew he did it, or hired it done, one or the other.
And both Bill Carter and Agent Mark Ludwig agreed on the motive for the murder, the affair Jason was having.
I believe he needed to stop his mom from telling his dad that he's having an affair.
I have no time for that. And he knew it too. I think he meant to kill both of us. I do. I think he was going to club me with something and then put a gun in my mouth.
All this time, Jason was back on his farm, tending to his fields, well aware that his father was turning on him.
He looked at me, and I've seen that look, I don't know, I couldn't tell you how many other times of when he's just sure about something. And he said, he looked at me and he said, you know, I've got it figured out.
It had been more than a year, a full season of planting and harvest, when Bill Carter gave up on the criminal investigation and decided to take his son to court.
Bill decided to take matters into his own hands, and so he filed the lawsuit.
A civil action against his son Jason, blaming him for Shirley Carter's wrongful death, the subject of the last conversation father and son ever had.
And then he said, "What are you going to do today, Dad?" And I said, "I'm going up to see my lawyer." And he hit the counter, the kitchen counter, hard, and he said, "My life is over. My life is over."
For 5 days in the Marion, Iowa County Courthouse, a civil trial that pitted father against son over the murder of the mother, a family tragedy.
Jesus, you know, what father does this to their child? What father does this?
The case received national attention.
Say a son killed his mother because he was going bust.
She was just laying there, looking off like, and I knelt down. And I grabbed her pant leg and shook it and said, "Mom," you know, hoping she'd respond somehow.
Did you scream?
No.
Were you crying?
You know, I think I don't, it was just shock.
In reality, killers come in all shapes and sizes. What I'll tell you is that Jason came across to us in the civil trial as, number one, highly insincere, and number two, very shifty.
Jason Carter's lawyers were convinced it was a ploy to spur a criminal charge against Jason.
We know that the prosecutor was sitting in the civil trial the entire time, taking notes. So in our opinion, law enforcement, the state of Iowa, and Bill Carter worked hand in hand.
A civil trial has a lower standard of proof than a criminal trial, but still it was no slam dunk.
Convincing a jury that a son is going to kill his mother in the kitchen of the farmhouse where that son was raised just sounds like quite a mountain to climb.
But the jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict.
I guess I had a bad gut feeling, and you know, my gut feeling was spot on.
Jason Carter, guilty, liable, ordered to pay $10 million.
When they came back with that $10 million judgment, I kind of figured everything was going to go to hell from there.
And it did. The prosecution now decided it had enough evidence to charge Jason Carter with murder. His nemesis, Agent Mark Ludwig, made sure he was the one to put Carter in handcuffs in front of Carter's teenage son.
And he said, I've been waiting 2.5 years to do this. He said, do you have anything to say, you pussy?
Now, much more was at stake than a $10 million judgment. Jason Carter, if found guilty, would be sentenced to prison for the rest of his life with no chance of parole.
Opening statements this afternoon. Is an Iowa son a seed of evil? It's a case of murder on the farm.
But even before the trial began, behind the scenes, Jason Carter had to consider a possible plea deal.
Jason had to make some very difficult decisions.
5 years or so in prison instead of a possible life sentence with no parole. A tempting deal.
Boy, you know, a person's pretty leery after going through a civil suit and them taking 2 hours to come up with a guilty. You just hate to put your hands into the jury again.
But his wife Shirley put her foot down.
No way in hell. Because Jason already spent 5 days in jail. And I said to him, you're not going to spend another day, not one more day, in jail or prison for something you didn't do. Your mom wouldn't be okay with it. I'm not okay with it. You're coming home to us.
So the trial began.
On behalf of the state, you may read the charge and make your opening statement.
Ed Bull, the county attorney, began by describing Jason Carter as a man who acted out of greed, who may have actually planned to kill both his parents to get his hands on their farm, valued at $6 million.
They weren't ready to retire and let Jason Carter have Carter Farms. So you might be wondering, if Jason Carter couldn't run Carter Farms instead of his parents, why didn't he just run Carter Farms with his parents? Jason Carter, the man sitting in that chair right there, said he could never go into business with that bitch.
For Jason Carter's lawyer, Christine Branstad, it was essential for her to paint a different picture of the relationship between Jason and his mother.
That Jason Carter was a son who loved his mother, spent a lot of time with her.
Essential for the defense to get ahead of what they knew was testimony coming about the mother-son relationship.
The state calls Brandon Smith, Your Honor.
A local farm equipment salesman, Brandon Smith, who knew the family and Jason well.
I asked why he didn't farm together with his dad, and his response was, I can't because my mom is a bitch.
Did it surprise you when he said that?
A little, yes.
Why?
I have known Shirley about as long as Bill, and it was just, she didn't strike me as that person. I guess I just didn't realize that was how he felt, I guess. Kind of took me back a little.
The defense was braced for the prosecution's strongest witness.
State of Iowa calls Bill Carter. If I can get you to raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please be seated.
The testimony of Jason's father, Bill Carter.
That was my biggest concern going into the trial, is that a jury would think, well, if the father thinks he did it, he must have done it.
The prosecutor began with questions to back up the alleged motive, money.
Did you start to have concerns that Jason was going to struggle to pay off his farming debts?
Yes, I did.
Jason, at the time of the murder, was deeply in debt. Bill was interested in farming with Jason to try to help him out. Shirley was dead set against it and did not want Bill and Jason to be farming together. And so Shirley was really the person standing in the way of the solution to Jason's financial problems.
How much was he going to come up short?
I assume somewhere between 100 and 150,000.
Bill Carter knew his testimony could put his son in prison for life.
Yeah, it bothered me. That's just because I loved him. You can't stop loving somebody. He did something terrible, but you can't stop loving somebody.
And the emotion was raw as the questioning turned to the moment Bill Carter found the body of his wife of 52 years.
What did you see?
I found Shirley on the floor. And she looked like she was sleeping. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were crossed. And her legs were crossed. And I picked her head up and I held her.
For the defense, no piece of evidence was more important than this surveillance video showing Jason Carter at the cargo grain silo between 9 and 10 in the morning, an hour's drive away from his parents' home.
Meaning that Jason Carter could not have been at the home at the time that Shirley Carter was killed.
And the defense would hammer that point home with their medical expert who testified about how long Shirley Carter had been dead when her body was found.
My opinion I would express would be around 2 hours.
The time of death was absolutely crucial, and I believe all medical evidence points towards a time of death at the point when Jason Carter would have been at Cargill.
Get you to raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear to tell the truth?
But the key witness for the defense, not for the prosecution strangely enough, was the state police lead investigator who had focused on Jason.
My name is Mark Ludwig.
I have never been involved in a case or seen a case of any significance where the state did not call the lead investigator.
What the defense wanted to show was a failure by Ludwig and others to follow up on tips from local residents that 3 area men with long criminal records had killed Shirley Carter during a botched robbery.
At least a dozen of those people say that it was a burglary gone wrong, correct?
I'm not sure how many people, but yeah, burglary gone wrong was something that we knew by noon on the day of the homicide was going around the small community.
But again?
Not to my knowledge.
And again?
I don't remember.
And again?
I don't know.
The agent was stymied by the questions.
I'm definitely confused at this point.
Or could not remember.
But I've done a lot of stupid stuff in my career and during interviews, and so I'd hope I wouldn't have done that.
What we were able to show is that they weren't fully investigated, and the door was open that they or anyone else could have been guilty.
None of the 3 men was ever charged in connection with the murder. Prosecutor Ed Bull sought to set the record straight.
Were there any alternative suspects that came to light?
Not from anyone other than Jason Carter.
Sir, has there been anyone during the investigation of the death of Shirley Carter that provided information that was consistent with what you found at the crime scene?
Yes.
Who was that person?
Jason Carter.
Jason Carter ever shed a tear?
Not once, never, until this courtroom.
So now the stage was set for Jason Carter to take the stand and once again attest to his innocence. The day began with a surprise move by Jason Carter's lawyers.
And Your Honor, the defense rests.
Very well.
Meaning Jason Carter was not going to testify in his own defense.
We had never really considered the idea of not putting Jason on the stand until the very end of the trials.
His lawyers thought they had a winning hand and did not want to let prosecutor Ed Bull have a go at Jason.
Lawyers are tricky, and the prosecutor is an excellent lawyer. And there's a good chance that he could have, made Jason say something, or that Jason would have gotten confused by the questioning.
Ladies and gentlemen, that means the evidence is done. As the saying goes, it's all over but the shouting.
So it was straight to the closing arguments.
There's no dispute someone committed murder in the first degree. The question is, who is that somebody?
But the prosecutor knew there was no physical evidence from the crime scene to connect Jason Carter. No fingerprints, no weapon. And the jury was not told about Carter failing the lie detector test.
Well, that damn thing is wrong!
Nor would the judge let the prosecutor reveal some other key facts about Jason.
The jury didn't hear about the affair. The jury had a much more limited understanding of Jason's financial circumstances and the family strife that caused. And so the jury had a much weaker understanding of why Jason would have done this.
It was a circumstantial evidence case based largely on surmise.
How does Jason Carter know his parents' bedroom is ransacked for any other reason than Jason Carter's the one who did it?
And the prosecutors scoffed at the defense position that law enforcement failed to investigate other possible suspects, calling it a distraction.
The only reason that story, these alternative suspects, make sense is because it's an attempted burglary. Well, who caused the attempted burglary? Jason Carter, by staging.
And finally, to Jason's relationship with his mother.
There was friction. We got told we were going to hear this story about this loving family with no conflict, and what you heard was just the opposite from Mr. Carter, Bill, and from Brandon Smith.
My mom is a bitch.
There's only two people in this world who know what happened, and one of them is dead, and the other one's sitting behind me. Based on the evidence, and in support of that evidence, the state of Iowa requests that you find Jason Carter guilty of murder in the first degree.
I believe we are ready for closing statement on behalf of the defendant, Ms. Branstad.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court? This was a case built against Jason Carter instead of a case trying to solve a crime and look at all the clues. And let's look at all the other leads that weren't followed. There were so many statements made about three individuals who don't have an alibi.
And then the defense's other main point, the video showing Jason Carter at the Cargill grain elevator, pulling away in his semi-truck just before 10 in the morning, about an hour's drive away from his parents' home.
Rest assured, the state has not had anyone who testified they believe Shirley Carter died after 10:30. Not one. There's no one who says they believe that time of death was later. But any one of those means Jason Carter could not have been there. And at the end of this case, there's so many holes in this investigation. There's so much that isn't even explored. And in reality, the forensic evidence not only says that there's reasonable doubt, the forensic evidence says Jason Carter couldn't possibly be guilty. Shirley Carter died long before that, probably while he was at Cargill on video. I ask you to return a verdict of not guilty. As the jury went out to deliberate, our main hope was that they would look at the evidence and the lack of evidence, and that they wouldn't be distracted by a family that had turned against Jason.
As the jury was deliberating his fate, Jason Carter was nervous, preparing for prison.
You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't.
He sent text messages to his teenage son Chase and 5-year-old daughter McKenna.
Just in case. I said, Daddy loves you very much, and that I would, I'll be home to see you soon. That was real hard. But I felt like I needed to do that because you never know what a jury's thinking.
He found out just 2 hours later.
You may be seated, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, have you reached a verdict?
And so I prepared Jason for the worst possible verdict and made some requests that he not overreact if he got a negative verdict.
Form of verdict number 1.
He was shaking, gray, and I have no color in his skin at all.
We, the jury, find Jason Carter not guilty. Is that your verdict, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Bull, do you care to have the jury polled?
No, sir.
Very well.
Started to cry visibly, and I think it was just the release of the pressure and the tension and what he had gone through.
And then kisses from the wife who had stood by him through it all.
Of acquittal, any bond previously posted by the defendant will be released and exonerated. Anything further on behalf of the defendant at this point, Ms. Branstad?
No, Your Honor.
On behalf of the state?
His father, Bill, was devastated.
They took me out of the courtroom as fast as they could get me out of there. The DA took me downstairs where I cried. I knew it was over with.
After the verdict, prosecutor Ed Bull said he remained certain Jason Carter was the killer.
I wouldn't have signed my name to the trial information and brought this case if I did not believe Jason Carter was responsible. We want to be certain we have the right guy, and we were certain we did. The jury saw it differently.
And I loved my wife. I loved her dearly. And I was afraid what would happen is exactly what happened. I was afraid there would be no verdict. And now she's what you call a cold case. She's a cold case.
The anger and the bitterness and the legal drama with the Carter family is still far from over. Jason and Shelley are suing his father, the state of Iowa, and Agent Mark Ludwig, who declined to comment.
We want a new set of eyes on this case in the worst way. We want an investigator who is going to investigate. We're over 5 years now, and we're still fighting. And you know what, I tell you what, we're not about to stop.